Just returned from a trip through Pennsylvania, New York, and Washington, D.C. She's excited to share her second story with us tonight at 10 by 9. Let's please welcome back Kendra Corrie.
Hey guys, okay. So, a little less comedy tonight, but maybe a little bit. So, in 2003, London saved my life. At least that's what I thought at the time. I was 22 years old. I was a full-time, straight-A college student, and double major, because I'm an overachiever, in theater and studio art, and a double minor in writing and poverty. And stay in school, kids. I was also living at home with my mother and abusive alcoholic stepfather. And in addition to the workload at school, I had 2 part-time jobs and a work-study position in the costume shop of the theater. So mostly to avoid going home as often as possible. And if you're doing the math on all of that time, I didn't sleep much. Sometimes I went days without sleep, and sometimes I would fall asleep in my car in the driveway because I was just gripping the steering wheel like a parachute that wouldn't open, because I was just dreading whatever monster might confront me on the other side of that door. I never knew, if my key was going to be too loud in the front door. And I was also the heaviest that I had ever been. And at 465 pounds, it's like all the Backstreet Boys, right? At that size, I had a heavy body and a much heavier heart. I was intelligent, I was hygienic, I was talented, and I was invisible, and I was miserable. And in addition to that, I had spent the previous decade, from the time I was 11 to 21, taking care of my ailing grandparents, my mother's mother and father. I had a grandmother who was diabetic and required daily insulin shots, and a grandfather who had Alzheimer's and would ask questions over and over again, and often screamed help in his before he would go to sleep. The cops were called 3 different times before I went door to door to my neighbors to say, "I promise we are not torturing this man. It's all good. And here's some cookies, and stop calling the police." At the end of his life, he also refused showers. He fell out of bed, and I ended up changing his diapers with as much dignity for the both of us as possible. Needless to say, I was never a kid. I never got to do that. I don't know anything about that way of life. And at that point in my life, at one night in the car, I thought, I hate everything about my life. I hate my body. I am ready to die. And I want it out of my life as much as some of you want out of this story right now. It's okay, spoiler alert, things got better. I'd only ever learned how to be with people and lonely. And a voice in my head said, "Death takes care of itself. If you're ready to do something drastic, there are many lives you could be living. This is not your only option, silly girl." And that was all in my head, and so I went to sleep, and I think I actually went inside that night. And by noon the next day, I overheard an older student talking about his travels to London, and immediately I was rapt with attention and hanging on his every word, and by the time he was done, I had one question, and my heart just sank, and I said, "How could I possibly afford that?" And he said, "Silly girl," right? I was like, "Hey, were you in my head last night?" He said, "Silly girl, your tuition pays for it." And in true workaholic form, I had the paperwork filled out within the next 24 hours, right? So during the interview portion, in front of this very proper suited panel of adults, I was pretending and, very stoic, and one of them very seriously rifled through my papers and said, "I see here you're an only child. Have you ever had a roommate?" And I gave the answer that eventually made me the #1 pick for the entire international internship program between 5 schools. Like, this is a program with 2 M's and an E, like, And I said, well, I am an only child, so no, I've always had my own servants' quarters, but I do know how to play well with others. And they chuckled, and I received a very merciful, small, single room, the only single room in all of the flats in London for this programme. And so for the first 3 weeks, I was still functioning in my normal survival mode. I completed all 4 months of work at my internship in 3 weeks. And then my boss said, well, I guess you could paint the black box, which is a whole theater. And I said, sure, give me the cans, I'll do it. And then I did it. And I did all of that through bronchitis and laryngitis because I forgot about free healthcare. And I just suffered through it, and I bought an extra blanket, and I, drank a lot of chicken soup. And, because American, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Like, I had this new thing called free time, and I held it like a frat boy with a stranger's baby. I don't know what to... Take it back, I'll kill it. Could not wrap my head around it. I had the meltdown to melt down all meltdowns. And I emailed Elizabeth, the director of the programme, and I said, I think there's been a mistake, I don't think I fit in here, and maybe you should just send me home. So this very contained, proper, Oxford-educated, stoic, soft-spoken woman, Elizabeth, she came to my flat. She did things that she had never done before. First, she came to my flat. She made physical contact and put both of her hands on my shoulders, and she shouted. Well, I said, she's British, so she just raised her voice a little bit. That's kind of how they shout. And she says, Kendra, chill out. You know you are uptight when an old, stodgy British woman is telling you to chill out. She said, chill out. It's going to be okay. Go down to the pub, have a pint, maybe 2. You Americans, you always live to work. Listen, while you're here, you are to work to live. What? I don't... So basically, I traveled 5,000 miles to learn that the prison had been in my mind the whole time. And so I started to learn. I started to learn how to live. And everything I did started to become magical. And not just because I started reading Harry Potter on the train, which was awesome. 90% of my time was spent in this glorious solitude. And I was alone and not lonely for the first time in my whole life. I stopped struggling. And I stopped trying and efforting to lose weight, which I had done for the last 18 years of my life. And because I stopped trying, left to my own devices, apparently I like healthy foods and walking. And I wasn't trying, but I dropped 50 pounds. And that has turned into, a journey that continues today. And I've dropped over 200. I know I have a way to go, all right? I'm still like a before picture in some of your minds, but it's okay. Because the real journey is in here. And I've learned a lot about myself. And I learned how to be disgustingly happy wherever I am. Like, I didn't have to be in London, but I was one of those annoying happy people, because everything I did took on this, brilliant shine. It was like, oh, I walked so long I got lost in London. And I saw a horrible play in London. Oh, I fell on the ice in London. I was the worst. But it's become the best. And I gave up everything that defined me, that I let other people use to define me. I learned how to say no to people. It's a full sentence, guys. Did you know that? It's awesome! And in giving up what everyone else had told me that I was and what I had told myself I was, I learned who I am. And I'm still learning, but I really learned how to work to live. So, thank you very much.
Yeah.